Okay, this is more notes from the Haggadah about Balaam in his ass. Okay, so we're talking probably Numbers 22, 23. Balaam could hardly await the morning, rejoicing no less than Balak's messengers at God's consent to his journey to Balak, and still hoping that he might succeed in bringing disaster upon Israel. In his haste to set out, he himself saddled his ass, although he did not lack servants, whereupon God said, O thou villain, their ancestor Abraham foretold thee. He too rose up early in the morning and in person saddled his ass to lead Isaac to sacrifice in fulfillment of the command that had reached him. The ass that Balaam took with him had been created on the 6th day of creation. He had received it as a gift from Jacob, that he might not give evil counsel to Pharaoh concerning Jacob's children. It was upon his advice, nevertheless, that Pharaoh forced the Israelites to make bricks. He took his 2 sons, Janus and Jamboree, or Janus and Jamboree, for it behooves a noble man always to have at least 2 companions upon any journey that he undertakes. Now, I just want to say there, Janus and Jamboree, they were the 2 sorcerers who were working with Pharaoh and whose sticks became snakes. And of course, Moshe's staff became a larger one that ate up their ones. So they also went through the Sea of Reeds and were part of the greater multitude that were in the desert. Now, Balaam must be very old when you think about it, because for him to have known Jacob, it tells you, when you look at Moshe, his father was the grandson of Levi, who was the grandson of Abraham. So we're talking a number of generations there. I also know of another lady, Serach, who came out from with Jacob. She was part of the 70 that came out into Egypt and was there for probably, I would say, about 200 years, maybe 250 years in Egypt. Also came out through the Sea of Reeds. She showed Moshe where the coffin of Joseph was in the river. And she was part of those that went into the land of Israel. So some of them did live for a long, long time in those days. Okay, although God had granted him permission to go on the journey, still his wrath was kindled when he set out. God said, Behold this man. He knows that I read each man's heart, and knows also that he departeth only to curse Israel. This wickedness on his part had the result that even the angel of mercy turned against him as an enemy, standing in his way. At first the ass alone perceived the angel, but not Balaam, for God has so arranged it that human beings may not perceive the angels that surround them, or else they would, through terror, lose their reason. The ass, on the other hand, instantly perceived the angel. He at first stood in her way, as she was in the middle of the road, and that she could turn aside on both sides. Then she perceived him when the road narrowed, that she could turn to one side only. And finally she reached a spot where there was no road at all to which she could either turn on this side or on that. This was to teach Balaam the following lesson. If he wished to curse Abraham's children, he should not have leeway on both sides, Ishmael's children and Keturah's children. If he wanted to curse Isaac's children, one side would still be open to him. Esau's children, if he wanted to curse Jacob's children, he should never bring it to pass, for they are protected on both sides. On the one hand, by Abraham and Isaac, and on the other, by Jacob and Levi, while God watches over them from above. The wall on this side and on that side, through which place he had to pass, were furthermore to indicate to him that he could not become master over Israel, who have in their possession the tables of the law that were written on both their sides. When the ass reached the wall where Jacob and Laban had erected as a token that they would never pass over it for harm, she thrust her feet against it to punish him for having broken his agreement with Jacob. Balaam, who had with bows attempted to make the ass walk straight ahead, flew into a rage when she lay down altogether and would not budge from the spot, so that he smote her all the more. Then the Lord opened the mouth of the ass and permitted her to use speech, a gift that she had possessed ever since her creation, but had not until then used it. She said, "What have I done unto thee that thou hast smitten me these 3 times?" The first words of the ass were so chosen as to call Balaam's attention to the wickedness and uselessness of his undertaking against Israel. 3 times was to remind him that he wished to curse a nation that 3 times in every year arranged pilgrims to the Lord, which were the 3 feasts, main feasts. The ass's speech was altogether to serve as a warning to Balaam to be aware of his mouth and not to curse Israel. The ass, through her speaking, was to instruct him that the mouth and the tongue are in God's hand. Balaam answered the ass in the language in which she had addressed him in Hebrew, which he did not, however, spoke fluently. He said, "Because thou hast mocked me, I would there were a sword in my hand, for now I had killed thee." The ass therefore replied, "Thou canst not kill me save with a sword in thy hand. How then wilt thou destroy an entire nation with thy mouth?" Balaam was silent, knowing no reply. The ass did not make him ridiculous in the eyes of the elders of Moab that accompanied him, but she also exposed him as a liar. The ass did not only make him ridiculous in the eyes of the elders of Moab that accompanied him, but she also exposed him as a liar. For when the ambassadors asked him why he had not chosen a horse rather than an ass for his journey, he answered that his saddle horse was in the pasture. Then the ass interrupted him, saying, "Am not I thine ass which thou hast ridden all your life long?" Balaam said, "I use thee as a beast of burden, but not for the saddle." And the ass said, "Nay, upon me hast thou ridden since thine earliest day, and thou hast always treated me with much affection, as a man treats his wife." Balaam now had to admit that the ass had spoken the truth. Balak's princes were much amazed at this extraordinary miracle, but the ass died the moment she had spoken what she had to say. God did this for 2 reasons. Firstly, because he feared that the heathens might worship the ass as were to stay alive, and secondly, because God wanted to spare Balaam the disgrace of having people point to his ass and say, "This is she that worshipped Balaam," or that worsened Balaam. By this action it can be seen how highly God prizes the honour of pious men, if he even sought to spare the honour of this villain. It is out of consideration to mankind also that God has closed the mouth of animals, as were they to speak, man could not well use them for his service, since the ass the most stupid of all animals, when she spoke, confounded Balaam, the wisest of the wise. So while all this was going on, Balaam still did not perceive that God's angel stood before him. God meant to show him that in his hand is not only the tongue of man, but his eye as well, so that as long as he chooses, man will fail to see what is directly before his nose. But God suddenly permitted Balaam to see the angel with a sword drawn in his face. The sword drawn in his hand, and Balaam fell flat on his face, for being uncircumcised, Balaam might not listen to the words of God or of an angel. Standing erect, hence, upon perceiving the angel, who instantly began to address him, Balaam cast himself upon the ground. The sword in the angel's hand did not signify that he meant to strike Balaam, for a breath from his mouth would have sufficed to kill myriads. But it was to point out the following truth to Balaam. The mouth was given to Jacob, but to Esau and to other nations the sword. Thou art about to change thy profession, and to go against Israel with his own weapon, and therefore shalt thou find death through the sword that is thy own weapon. The angel now said to Balaam, If I have been commissioned to demand restitution from thee for the injustice that thou hast offered to the ass, that can show neither meritorious deeds of her own nor of her father's, how much more shall I stand up as the avenger of an entire nation that have their own merits and can refer to the merits of their fathers? But to return to the ass, why didst thou smite her and turn from the road only because she saw me and was frightened? Balaam was a shrewd sinner, for he knew that divine punishment could be averted only by penance, and that the angels have no power to touch a man who, after sinning, says, I have sinned. Hence, he said to the angel, I have sinned, but added, I did not set out until God said to rise. Rise up and go with him. And now thou sayest to me, return, but this is the Lord's way. Did he not also at first tell Abraham to sacrifice his son? And then he caused an angel to call out to him, Lay not thy hand upon the lad. It is his custom first to give a command, and through an angel to recall it. So also did he indeed say this to me, Go with them, but if he displeases thee, I shall turn back. The angel replied, All that I have done was to thy advantage. But if thou art bound to plunge into destruction, do so. Go with these people, but destruction is decreed for all of you. Think not, however, that thou shalt do as thou wilt, for thou shalt have to say what I desire thee to speak, and to restrain what I wish to remain unuttered. In spite of the warnings he had received from God and the angel, he was not to be restrained from taking his fatal step, but in his hatred towards Israel, still cherished the hope that he should succeed in obtaining consent to curse Israel, and he continued his journey in his happy expectation.